Fresh Kid Z, Fresh Kid C,
Yes, sir.
Fresh Kid P, Fresh Kid T.
Oh yeah, we back.
Oh, and Zafoon, by the way.
Yeah.
Jones. Yeah. Chitty Bang. And we pretty much amazing.
Can we hear your new song, please?
I got you.
Hey yo, I once was a kid, all I had was a dream. More money, more problems, when I get it, I'ma pile it up. Now I'm dope, want the bread we can toast. So fresh how we flow, everybody get their style from us. I once was a kid with the other little kids. Now I'm ripping up shows and them fans going wild with us. Tell mommy I'm sorry, this life is a party. I'm never growing up. Reminisce days of the innocence. Now it's Chitty Bang, Google me the images.
Welcome back to the 10th episode of the Hoosier Hipsteria podcast.
10 episodes.
Happy 10 podcast anniversary, Josh Wachtel.
And to you too, Nick Wright.
All right, and now that we've gotten that sappy crap out of the way, we can move on to the meat of the show, which is obviously sports meat.
It's obviously sports. Our very own, Hoosier Hipsteria's own Nick Wright, got his first live broadcasting experience of his career. He broadcasted the IU baseball game this past Sunday, was it?
It was Sunday afternoon, the second game of a doubleheader.
Why don't you tell us about what it was like when you first started, initial reactions? And
Well, truth be told, well, for starters, I did not know how much equipment they were going to provide for me. So I assumed, well, I'd have headphones and a microphone and a computer. No, this is IU Sportcom. This isn't ESPN.
Yeah.
I had to bring my own stuff with me. So find this out about a half hour before the game starts. I have to run from the baseball stadium back to Wright to get my stuff and then come back. And then my computer couldn't connect to the internet there, so I had to go pretty much blind throughout the entire broadcast. Without the guy that was doing play-by-play with me had the baseball cast up, so he could readily check stats the whole game, and I couldn't do that. Oh well, I also brought my own headphones back, and because I needed my own headphones. But other than that, it was actually a really exhilarating experience. It's kind of chaotic being up there with everyone else moving around, like checking stats with each other. Two other guys that are in my sport communication class were doing the media coverage, the broadcast actually for the Big Ten Network while we were there. So that was really cool to watch while we were doing our thing. We only had 5 viewers at a given time. It was very low traffic.
Exactly, yeah.
And I do have a new empathy for commentators. I used to always berate commentators on what terrible insight they give and what obvious insight they give. But it's all mostly ad-libbed because you can't
predict what's going to happen.
You can't predict what's going to happen. You don't know what you're going to have to talk about. The only thing that you can bring that's original information is, well, the statistics in front of you from previous games. And if you have random facts about players or things like that. For example, we got to talking at one point about, I had played Little League Baseball against 2 of the IU baseball players. So
Serious? That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'd mentioned that in my broadcast as part of the analysis. But, of course, that only lasted 10 seconds, so I had to fill the other 3 hours.
The rest of the game was just complete silence.
With other information. I was pretty much going off the seat of my pants the whole time, but that's what made it fun.
So it was exhilarating for you?
It was definitely very exhilarating, very nerve-wracking.
So
never done anything like that before.
So after this game, obviously this is your first game, but do you think you'd rather do color or play-by-play? Which one do you think would be easier?
I don't know, because of the show and how I do the Hoosier Hipsteria podcast, I think play-by-play would be more of a thing that I could do because I narrate more often, and that'll be easier with sports. It'll be easier to do commentary with sports that I know better than baseball, but baseball's the only option that we have right now this late in the school year. Nonetheless, I do have one more game of experience as a commentator than a play-by-play guy, so I guess for the time being, I'd have to say color commentary is where I would go.
Do you think you kind of improved as the game went on? You got more comfortable and stuff?
Yeah, and that just has to do with how well the two guys or girls in the booth communicate with each other.
Oh,
Will
yeah.
and I have a class together, but we didn't really like have a personality like thing until about the 4th, 5th inning. It was really awkward at the beginning. We didn't have a lot to say to each other. Then we started going back and forth with weird commentary talking about different guys' names and how cool they were. And we had a discussion for a little bit about guys like Cal Ripken and Wilt Chamberlain and just unbreakable records in sports.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it was like, okay, yeah, now we have this ability to go back and forth with each other. And that helped the chemistry a lot.
It's got to be difficult to do baseball games. Also, not only do you not have as much experience with that, but there's so much downtime in between things happening. You have to have a lot to say. Like in basketball, you basically just analyze things that just happened because it's so fast paced. Was that like a challenge for you, do you think?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of downtime, and also there's a lot of spontaneous occurrences. You could talk through an at-bat for the most part, as long as you update what the pitch was.
Yeah.
But you don't know when the batter's going to make contact, and if you're right in the middle of a comment, you have to pretty much stop so that the play-by-play guy can run or can narrate the play as it's happening, and that caused a lot of awkward moments in the broadcast because I would be talking and then I would just get interrupted, rightfully so.
Yeah.
But I would get interrupted mid-analysis.
And lose your train of thought and stuff.
Yeah. So there was that, and yeah, I don't know, baseball was tough, but I'm glad it was a good first experience because, I mean, I know sports like basketball and football a lot more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good.
Why don't you just briefly tell us about what happened in the game? Any exciting events? What was the final score? Stuff like that.
Well, the Hoosiers lost both of their games.
That's sad. Who did they play?
The day. They played the Michigan State Spartans.
That's not good.
Michigan State's a very good team.
Yeah.
They lost both games. The second one they lost 20-10.
Ooh. Is that the one you called?
Yeah, that was the one I called, and the Spartans went on a very early rally. They actually went through, I think, 3 pitchers in the first inning, and the Hoosiers went on 3 pitchers in the first inning because they just couldn't find the right guy for the job. And so it was kind of it was a miserable game to call from like a fan's perspective, but I still got a lot of experience in a rather unique situation, calling a game where the team that you're supporting was never really in it.
Mm-hmm.
They had a late rally in the 8th. They scored 8 of their runs in the 8th and 9th inning. So that was kind of exciting. A lot of home runs.
Yeah.
Michigan State hit 1 home run, and then I know Kyle Schwarber for the Hoosiers, the catcher, he hit a home run, and Chase Knobloch hit a home run. Chase Knobloch is the nephew of MLB great Chuck Knobloch.
MLB great. I wouldn't go that far.
So
yeah.
Great Michigan State pitching. Got to see a lot of just awesome MLB caliber breaking balls from their pitcher David Gardner. Actually, IU went through 5 pitchers. They settled eventually on a guy named Hunter Brown who'd only pitched 1 inning before that game. He did a pretty good job for the rest of the game. I was actually really impressed. He had the only 2 scoreless innings in the game. Other great performances by a guy from Michigan State, Ryan Jones. Through 4 innings, he was 4 for 4.
Wow!
And we were looking to see if there was a record of consecutive innings with a hit and to still bat 1,000. He ended up, I think, 5 for 6 on the day. So it was really impressive. I was very impressed with his performance. Obviously, David Gardner's performance at pitching. Another Michigan, obviously these are all Spartans. Another Michigan State player, Anthony Checky, had some of the fastest legs I've ever seen in the college game, and that showed up both on offense and defensive side. So that was really cool watching him run the base pads, and he robbed a huge hit. He had a very impressive game. And then always the best name on the field, Torsten Boss.
Torsten Boss, ladies and gentlemen. He's going to be an MLB great, even just because of his name.
He was He was in the preseason top 10.
Is he Michigan
for
State
the
as
Big
well?
Ten? Yeah,
Okay.
Michigan State.
Torsten
He's
Boss.
pretty good. But yeah, and in the end, the Hoosiers dropped to 16-20 overall at the end of the day, and they're now 6-6 in conference play. They're tied for 5th, and you have to make the top 6 teams to make the Big Ten tournament in Columbus later in the month.
How many more games are left for the
They
season?
they have quite a few games left,
All
quite
right.
a few series. I know just for this week, they have a game Tuesday versus Louisville at 3 p.m. And then they have an entire weekend series, a Little 5 weekend versus Georgia Southern. So if you're not out partying, head over to the IU baseball series versus a Southern baseball team. They play Friday at 3, Saturday at 1, and Sunday at 1. So, yeah.
Excellent. So an enriching experience for you, although the games didn't go as well as we had hoped.
No, it wasn't a positive game to call, but it was a game to call nonetheless.
Any experience is a good experience.
I was happy about it.
All right, well, let's move on then.
Yeah, moving on. The obvious hot topic at this time, now that IUBB news is pretty much out of the way for a while.
Hopefully we'll find ways to put it in anyway.
Well, we can talk about more basketball, more local basketball. And then, of course, I mean the Indiana Pacers, Circle City's finest.
The team that nobody knows about and no one pays attention to.
The team nobody knows about, nobody pays attention to. That's another topic for another few minutes from now. They're looking pretty good heading into the playoffs, wouldn't you say, Josh?
Definitely.
They're on a 9-1 tear through April. They have
the best record in the league in April.
The longest active win streak.
5 games, is it?
5 games. They are 39-22 on the season. A lot better than what we saw last year from a team that couldn't get past 500 in the win-loss percentage. They do have 5 games left on the season, as do most teams. But what do you see from the remainder of their schedule that could give them some problems, or do you think that they could run the table for the rest of their schedule?
Well, it's definitely possible for them to run the table. The only games I see them struggling with are their next game, which is today, technically, Tuesday, at Philadelphia. The 76ers were one of the best teams in the league earlier in the season, and they've kind of fallen on hard times since then. But they're still arguably the fastest team overall in the league. So that'll be an interesting game, especially since it's in Philadelphia. And then they play the Bucks at home, the 76ers at home, and the Pistons at home. I don't sense any trouble winning those games. Obviously, anything's possible, but on paper, at least they should be favored. And then they close out the season on the 25th at home against the Bulls, which is going to be an interesting game because the Bulls are most likely going to be the number 1 overall seed. And it's going to be interesting to see if the Pacers can end their regular season on a positive note heading into the postseason.
Well, it'll be really interesting to see if the Bulls start Derrick Rose that game.
Yeah, definitely.
Granted, he is the best player on their team. However, they have proven that they can win without him throughout the season. And I don't know, just if they have the number 1 overall seed wrapped up with 1 game left on the road versus Indiana, I don't know if I would risk anything.
I would definitely
if I were Tom Thibodeau. So I would probably rest. I would probably not start Rose, and I would probably give a lot of my key starters limited playing time.
Definitely.
Every win counts, but if those seeds are evened up and the Pacers have no chance of getting that number 2 seed, I think they'll go ahead and rest their starters.
I think the Pacers are all but mathematically eliminated from the 2 seed because right now they're 4.5 games behind the Heat for that seed. So if I'm doing my math right, if the Heat lose every game and the Pacers win every game, then they'll get the 2nd seed, but it's the Heat, so it's pretty unlikely.
It's the Heat, it's unlikely, and the Pacers, it's unlikely.
Yeah. Going back to the idea about the Bulls resting their starters or not, though, I agree with you. I would definitely rest Rose. I wouldn't even play him unless they don't have the number 1 seed locked up. I just burped twice, I'm sorry. Because the Bulls are 20... they're pretty good on the home and the road. But it's always good to have home court advantage, obviously, because most teams play better on their home court. So if they don't have that locked up, I think they'll play him. But if they do, then I would definitely rest them if I were Thibodeau.
And you said, okay, we're looking at their playoff potential. I know that the end of the season isn't quite over, but I think it's safe to say we can look ahead to the playoffs. Obviously, they've clinched a spot in the playoffs at this point. They'll probably finish and get that 3rd seed, barring any mishaps. What do you see from this team that could carry them deeper than the first round this year in the playoffs?
Well, the way the playoffs, if the playoffs started today, the Pacers would play the Magic in the first round, and the Magic are right now without their player Dwight Howard, and he's on my fantasy team kind of, so I've been keeping tabs on him, and it looks like they're going to reevaluate him in about a week and a half to see if he's going to be ready for the playoffs, but nothing's set in stone. If Dwight Howard's out, then I would be really surprised if the Pacers didn't win that series, possibly pretty easily. But I don't want to jinx them or anything, obviously. But on paper, at least, I think the Pacers are better than the Magic, even with Dwight Howard. But if they don't have him, then they're definitely going to be the favorites in that series.
Well, looking at the Orlando Magic, they've already clinched the playoffs. They're currently 6th in the Hollinger Power Rankings, 36-25 record, and they actually have a lead on the Pacers in their series, 3-1 in the regular season. Actually, sorry, they're not 6th in the Hollinger. They're 6th in the standings. They're 19th in the Hollinger Power Rankings.
It's a lot
one of the worst playoff contending teams. In that they're 3-7 in their last 10, and just looking at them, like you said, Dwight Howard, if he's not good to go for the playoffs, the Pacers will win the series in 5.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It goes without saying, but Dwight Howard isn't their only weapon. Granted, he does lead the team in points, rebounds, steals, and blocks. Another guy that is injured at the moment, but can make a big impact, Ryan Anderson, their power forward.
Yeah, definitely.
15.6 points per game, 7.5 rebounds per game. He's played most of the games this season. And for a big man, he's shooting 40% from beyond the arc. And he has what I think is the team's highest free throw percentage. So don't count them out if Howard's not in, because Ryan Anderson can make a big performance given that he's healthy. Another guy that they need to watch out for is Jameer Nelson, because they'll probably put Collison on him. Collison's not back to full health.
It's going to be interesting, though, to see if George Hill or Darren Collison gets to start at point guard.
Right, and I think you give the original nod to Collison, because Hill is what he does off the bench is almost unprecedented, and to have him come in the middle of the game fresh like that, it's arguable who's the best point guard between those two, but to have a guy that's good enough to hang as your starting point guard, and then to have your possibly better point guard come in the middle of the game when everyone else is resting their starters, that's a gift that the Pacers have that not a lot of other teams
their depth is definitely
share.
Yeah.
Just an overall wrap up on the Magic, providing they play the Magic. 4th best defense. A little bit skewed because they play in the Southeast, which isn't known a lot for high-scoring games. Great perimeter shooting with guys like Jameer Nelson, Jason Richardson, and J.J. Redick as their starters. I mean, that's unprecedented. However, they have no team chemistry.
Especially all the stuff between Stan Van Gundy and Dwight Howard. It's taking a huge hit.
And it's clear, I made this pun up earlier, the black and blue is black and blue at this point. They are a battered and bruised team. J.J. Redick, the only person to start all 61 games for this program. So
they're almost the exact opposite of the Pacers at this point.
Right.
Because the Pacers have such a high team chemistry, and they're playing arguably their best basketball of the season right now. And the Magic cannot be said the same for them on either level.
Right. I'd say this is the team that the Pacers would prefer to play in the first round of the postseason. However, if they don't, there's another team that's actually tied overall with the Orlando Magic, and that's the Atlanta Hawks. This team could take over that 6th spot, given it provided that Orlando actually outperforms the Hawks through the remainder of the season. This is a lot better of a team.
Definitely. They have a lot more weapons.
They also beat the Pacers 2-1 in their series this season. They're 11th in the Hollinger rankings. Guys like Josh Smith, Joe Johnson, two lethal weapons. Lethal weapons 1 and 2, to be specific. That could give them a lot of problems. And also, Jeff Teague can be a very dangerous point guard.
Jeff Teague is having a career year in his short career.
Yeah, they're a tough team, too. They've always been known for not letting them go to the lane easily. They average about 18.1 fouls per game as a team. Yeah, so I'd rather the Pacers face Orlando than Atlanta. I think they can win both series. I think they can just get it done easier if they have to play Orlando.
Totally agreed.
What would you say about just the season overall for the Pacers? Like, what would you attribute most to their success?
I would say that first of all, Frank Vogel should be. I'm not going to say he should be the coach of the year, but if he's not at least under heavy consideration for it, I will launch an investigation. Because the way he's gotten that team to mesh with each other, they have a great balance of experience with guys like David West and Danny Granger, and youth with guys like Paul George and Paul George, people like that. Their depth is a great asset because they have guys who would be starting for a lot of other teams coming off the bench. They have good leaders and guys like Danny Granger. And another point is that Roy Hibbert has improved dramatically from the earlier points in his career, including last year. He's become a great defensive player. He's become more active in the paint, both with blocks, rebounds, and points. So I would say just the improvement of their young guys and their overall team chemistry and the way Vogel's gotten everything to work together.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of players have just improved a lot over the season. Obviously, Paul George has just completely come out of his cage this season.
Like many people thought he would.
Yeah, he's played every game this year. He's a great defender. Leads the team in steals.
Definitely.
He averages 12 points per game. He isn't known for his three-point shooting, but can still hit it 37% from the free throw line or from the three-point line. Just the most athletic player on the team.
Yeah,
bar none. The only concern I have is when he breaks away on those dunks. Recently, he's been missing a lot of those dunks.
Yeah, which is weird because he would just nail them earlier in the season.
So that showmanship might get in the way in the playoffs. That could lead to some easy points. If he just needs to calm down a little bit more, especially on the road when that kind of motivation doesn't really matter as much, and just take that easy dunk or that easy layup. I don't know. I like seeing the big dunk, but at the same time, I like to see the 2 points.
Yeah,
more than
points are definitely more important than showmanship. It's going to be interesting to see how they are different from last year, though, because last year they were the under 500 team who no one thought had any shot, and even playing with the Bulls, and they took them to 5 games. Granted, it was only 5 games, but still they were within single digits of almost all of those games. So they played really well when they were the underdogs. But now they kind of have the targets on their back, even though no one's really paying attention to them on SportsCenter or anything. But if you think that the NBA teams haven't taken notice of the Pacers, then you are probably sorely mistaken. So it's going to be interesting to see how they react to that.
Well, yeah, and most of that has to do with all the things that have happened between last year and this current year. Looking at their starting 10, more or less, obviously their starting 5 features a new player in David West, a guy they didn't have last year when facing the Bulls. So you had Tyler Hansbrough out there guarding Carlos Boozer.
Yeah.
Not a favorable matchup for the Pacers. Now with David West, they get to make more of a case for themselves. David West has a lot of intangibles. Granted, he is one of the better players on the team. He's 12 points per game, 6 rebounds per game kind of guy. 48% from the field. He's a great contributor to the scoreboard, but at the same time, his intangibles are what make him so great. In his first few weeks with the Pacers, he was telling the guys in the locker room, a loss should not be an acceptable thing. We need to expect to win, all those kind of things. And he took leadership of the team within the first few weeks of being there. And that kind of leadership can go deep into the playoffs, especially if you have. And I'd credit him to having taking most of the credit for this team's chemistry this season.
Completely.
And also look at other guys that they've added. They've added so many guys in the offseason. George Hill from San Antonio, a local kid. Probably the best backup point guard, easily the best backup point guard in the NBA.
Yeah.
I'd safely say that.
With no information in front of me, I'd probably agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's got 9.3 points per game. He's played 48 of the 61 games, and that's only because of...
He was injured earlier.
Yeah, the injury. Or 46 of the 61 games, my mistake. I mean, he just knows how to control the floor with the second team.
It's definitely inarguable that he provides a very big spark off the bench, and he provides leadership, he provides scoring, and he provides the intangibles that make a point guard great. So he's been a huge part of this team as well. Another
guy that they added, arguably one of the steals of the NBA transactions during the season, Leandro Barbosa from Toronto.
Definitely.
They actually grabbed him not too long ago for a second-round pick next year. Mm-hmm. I'd say it's a steal considering Barbosa was a starter either a starter or he got a lot of minutes with the Toronto Raptors, and a guy that's made his case around the league over the years.
He was a very dynamic player with the Suns when he was there, too.
Yeah, he is. He's leading the team in three-point percentage at almost 40% from the three-point line.
Impressive.
It's very impressive. He also provides 11.2 points per game off the bench and has started, as I see here, he has started 60 of the 61 games this season with Toronto and Indiana. The only game that he's missed is the game where he got traded from Toronto and couldn't quite make it to that first Indiana game with him on board. So he hasn't missed any time. He's an invaluable asset to this team, and he has gone on scoring runs, solo scoring runs when the teams need it most.
He's definitely a large part of the depth that we mentioned earlier. And I think, I'm not going to say this as a complete and arguable fact, but the Pacers definitely do have one of the best second teams in the league. I don't know who would have a better one than that.
Yeah,
because the thing about the Pacers is they don't have any superstars. They just have like 11 really good players. Maybe not 11, but they have like 9 or 10 really good players.
Well, that's why you see guys having such a well-rounded points per game average.
Yeah,
like the leading scorer for the Pacers is Danny Granger at 18.7 points per game. He's only had one huge scoring game where I think he put up like 37 points in one game. That's the only time he's ever broken out and been like one of the top contributors. Everyone else contributes their fair amount. Guys like Hansbrough bringing 9.4 points off the bench. Hill, 9.3 off the bench. Barbosa, as I mentioned, 11.2 off the bench. And, they're just spread around so well.
Definitely.
And another guy that they've acquired in the offseason that is totally worth mentioning is the center from Golden State, Lou Amundsen.
I was just about to bring him up.
Easily my favorite bench player.
Oh, definitely.
And one of my favorite Pacers players in very recent history.
Yeah.
He's
like the Tom Pritchard of this team.
Yeah, his statistics don't show very much. He's been in 55 of the 61 games, and that's mostly because if Jeff Foster was available, they would put Jeff Foster in.
Yeah.
But since he's retired, he's been getting a lot more minutes. His stats aren't beautiful by any means.
They're not beautiful.
He does shoot 45% from the field, which is one of the top percentages on the team. I don't know. He provides that energy for the crowd.
Definitely.
And for the team. Whenever he makes a big play, I remember there was the one game where he went off and had like 22 points.
Against the Trailblazers, yeah. I was there with our not here comrade, David Keller, and he almost got a double-double, except Jeff Pendergraft ruined it.
Well, that's fine.
But the crowd was going insane. The Pacers were up by like 20 plus most of the game, And they were still going crazy whenever Lou got the ball because they just wanted to see him do stuff.
Well, it's the ponytail.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
He's a guy that I want to see do something in the playoffs that's like highlight worthy.
Just slam it down.
Yeah,
Derrick Rose
I went to the Celtics game not too long ago, and there was an alley-oop from George Hill to Lou Amundsen, and I was perplexed. I did not know what was happening. A guy that I do want to mention is he's not necessarily the best player on the team, but he is my factor of the team, and that is Roy Hibbert.
Roy Hibbert, definitely.
Outstanding performance from this guy. He made the All-Star team this year, only Pacer to do it, which solidifies him as one of the top 3 centers in the East.
Yeah, probably.
You get a guy like Dwight Howard who's got inarguable talent. He's fantastic. Attitude issues obviously run rampant,
but his talent is inarguable.
His raw talent's unprecedented. He is still, in my opinion, the best center in the NBA.
I would agree.
And then you could make a case for Joakim Noah from Chicago. Great, but I think Hibbert's just a little bit better.
Maybe Amari Stoudemire, depending on what you classify his position as.
Yeah,
he's definitely in contention for a top 3 in the East.
Well, yeah, big man, absolutely. I would consider Tyson Chandler to be the next center.
Yeah.
So in that case, I would put Hibbert as 2 or 3 in the East. Just an outstanding player,
and he's improved so much. Like I said before, he's improved so much from last year. And I wonder how much David West had to do with that, actually, because they're both big.
David West had a lot to do with it. I know this summer, during the lockout, Roy Hibbert spent a lot of off-season time training with Tim Duncan, which was kind of cool.
That's really cool.
That Tim Duncan actually went and helped him out, but nonetheless, he's been putting the work in.
Definitely.
And it shows on the board, 13 points per game. He's the second highest scorer on the team on average. 8.9 rebounds per game and 2 blocks per game. Those last 2 stats leading the team. He's played every game this season. That's another thing I'd like to just briefly touch on, is how willing these guys are to go out and play. You don't have the big stars, so you don't have guys that are sitting out and being kind of divas, like inexplicable reasons. Kobe Bryant's sitting out, or other guys like that just kind of want to take it out. You have 2 guys this season that have strapped on face masks and played through injuries.
Yeah.
And it happens in the NBA, but to have big men like Tyler Hansbrough and Roy Hibbert who bang in the post, both just put a face mask on and said, we want some more. And I'm just very impressed with that level of toughness. And that's the kind of toughness that shows that a team's going to be successful in the long run.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I mean, now that we've pretty much run the splits on the Pacers statistics, safe to say that they're a very good team. They've improved almost 180 degrees from last season. Very, very impressive. The season's been a great season, too. Well, theoretically not watch because at IU Bloomington they don't provide Fox Sports.
Sadly.
So I have seen maybe 2 games aside from the one that I attended earlier.
I think I've seen 3. One of them was on one of the Bulls games was on WGN, and I've seen a couple when I went home, and I went to a couple games this year. So yeah, definitely. It's tough to watch it down here, but I do what I can.
Well, here's hoping their postseason play doesn't make it to NBA TV, instead makes it on ESPN or TNT.
Be filled with rage if that happens.
Yeah. I mean, kind of looking ahead, say they beat the Magic.
Yeah.
They're probably going to have to play the Heat. A team that nobody wants to face on any given night, whether you're going to beat them or not. It's a team you don't want to face. It's a team that we almost don't have to speak for because ESPN does it enough on their own. But it's kind of worth mentioning. Starting 5 of Mario Chalmers, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Joel Anthony or Ronnie Turiaf, depending on the night. A very, very daunting lineup. Definitely. I don't know how they were able to put this together, but we've seen what it can do in last year and this year.
Well, like you said, they're a team that can... It's sort of hard to tell what they're going to do because they have a bunch of superstars, obviously. But at the same time, it's hard for them to put it together at times. Like this season, they're I just had this up there. I think I said they're 4.5 games ahead of the Pacers, which is pretty close actually. And you'd think from watching SportsCenter and stuff like that the Heat were 15 games ahead of the Pacers, but they're pretty close. They've played 4 times this year. The first game was the 7th game of the year. The Heat won it by 35. Wasn't even a game. Then they won again. The Heat won again by 15 in February. Then the game that was in Miami that went to overtime after LeBron James hit a 3 to put it into overtime. Then Dwayne Wade hit his ridiculous circus shot to win it at the buzzer. And then the last time they played was March 26th, in which the Pacers handled them pretty easily, beating them by 15. So what we've learned is that while at the beginning of the season the Heat destroyed the Pacers, as time went on, I'm not sure if it's just the Pacers improved or if they learned how to play the Heat better. I'm going to probably say it's both of them. But this is a team that can definitely compete with this, can compete with the Heat. And although I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, I think if they play, it'll be a very good series, very well contested series.
Well, it'd be kind of like one of those classic series
Definitely.
that you can look back on, let's hope, as one of those things where you have the underdog Pacers, and the Pacers are obviously put a good season together, but
They're not the Heat.
They're not in the limelight constantly like the Heat, and I'm starting to get deja vu with the mid-'90s Pacers versus the Knicks matchups,
Definitely.
where you could see an obscure rivalry pop up, where you have this small-town hero versus these big-town bad boys, too. That was a movie reference.
Yeah.
Miami Takedown. And so you could see a big, just a big clash between two different mentalities and two different fan bases that it could make for some great basketball entertainment.
Definitely. It's probably going to be the most underrated series of the... again, getting ahead of ourselves, if they should meet in the second round, it could potentially be one of the best series. Could be one of the best series because I hate to keep going back to this, but major outlets like SportsCenter don't talk about the Pacers very much. So although Pacers fans know that they are good, most of the general public doesn't know that they're very good. They'll see that they're a 3 seed, but they'll say, it's the Pacers, they're not that good. So it's going to be... I think the Pacers are going to surprise a lot of people if they get to that point. I think it's going to be reminiscent of last year when they played the Bulls, except on a different level because the Pacers are...
Might be reminiscent of last year when I think it was the Heat that played the Hawks, and they took them to, 6 or 7 games?
I think so, yeah. It's going to be a little like that, I think, except the Pacers are good enough to pull it off if it gets to that point. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm definitely excited. And back to what you were saying about SportsCenter and ESPN and local news for that matter. Their lack of coverage of the Indiana Pacers is a bit ridiculous in my opinion, and I think that's led to their lack of fan support.
Yeah, I agree
for a
with
team that's third in the East, mounting the best record in April so far. They are 29th in league attendance this season. They've only averaged a crowd of 14,064. They're last in total attendance. They're the only team, over the season, they're the only team that has brought in less than 400,000 tickets. They're at 393,000, I think, is for attendance. And I know, one of the arguments is, well, they don't have as big of a stadium as Madison Square Garden, or they don't have as big of a stadium as Boston Garden, anything like that. Well, I look at this, and the percentage of seats sold out, they're still 27th in percentage. 77% of the stadium that's it. That's all that's getting sold out. Meanwhile, some teams like the Miami Heat are actually over 100% in sold out. And I don't know. What do you think's the reason for that?
I think the main reason is that every team... most teams that you can think of have a superstar. Whether it's Dwight Howard, whether it's the Heat with the big three, whether it's the Bulls with Derrick Rose, there's a superstar on the team. The Pacers don't have that. They're kind of like a college team. Like a good... they're not Kentucky. They're like a good...
They're like the Denver Broncos from last year.
Exactly, yeah. I don't want to say a ragtag bunch of kids or anything, because they're really not. But the biggest household name on that team is Danny Granger, maybe David West, and theirs aren't exactly top-tier NBA teams. I think that's mostly why. But you'd think that, like SportsCenter, an outlet who covered Jeremy Lin, basically a 24/7 Jeremy Lin watch, because it was a great story. And I'm not arguing that, because it was a great story, because he had been discounted so many times in his life, and he was the starter of the New York Knicks. But the Pacers are a great story. They were under 500 last year. They fired their coach halfway through the year. And then they turned it around, went to the playoffs, almost beat the Bulls, kind of. And now that they're having one of their most resurgent seasons, probably one of their best seasons since the likes of Ron Artest and Jermaine O'Neal were here.
Yeah,
when they were winning the East, when they were playing the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals every year. I mean, if I went out like SportsCenter, I would focus on that story. But it's not great news because people care more about Dwight Howard and Stan Van Gundy fighting every day than they do about 9 good players beating teams like the Thunder and the Heat.
Well, I think what you see with coverage like SportsCenter and other big media outlets for sports is the primary amount of information is going to go towards deviance first.
Exactly.
It's obviously going to be the most interesting story because it deviates from the norm. If you talk about a team like the Pacers that, these are a bunch of well-to-do guys out there playing great basketball, having kind of a comeback season, I don't know, it's not something that's often talked about, especially when you have scandals with coaches,
exactly.
Teams that are falling apart, and stuff with the Saints. The Saints probably, in my opinion, deserve half the coverage they're getting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have two situations where there's the whole aftermath of the bounty situation, and Drew Brees isn't agreeing to his franchise tag and therefore is not showing up when that team needs leadership now more than anything. So that's going to be a talked about story almost every day on ESPN. And then the likes of Bobby Petrino's coaching scandal. I mean, there's too many deviant stories out there to have time to talk about a team in a small market that's doing pretty well for themselves. Another reason but that shouldn't affect the local.
The local stuff, I just don't understand at all because it's like we don't even have a team.
I think what's happening is Indianapolis is very, very slow to adapt.
Definitely.
New thoughts and new opinions and new movements. And, well, the NBA has had a very recent bad rep. The last time the Pacers have been good, that team essentially let them down, getting in that brawl with the Pistons,
Definitely.
having a lot of off-the-court issues with guys like Jamal Tinsley. I mean, a lot of people think the Pacers are still a bunch of thugs. They were last time that they were good, but now they're a different team under different leadership, and it's definitely a different situation. A lot of people don't know that though because they still have those in Indianapolis and in this area. A lot of people just have built-up stereotypes, and they can't get over them.
And I think a thing that has to do with that is also, I think that and the lack of coverage goes hand in hand with each other because they're not, like, the local news and SportsCenter aren't talking about how the Pacers are a completely different team from then and how they're a good team and they're a team that it's pretty easy to root for because, for the most part, I can't think of many bad things to say about the guys on the team. So it's a little upsetting to me as a Pacers fan because we finally have a team that deserves a lot of media attention for the right reasons as opposed to having guys go firing guns into the air at strip clubs and beating up fans and stuff. It's just a little upsetting to me because they deserve more media attention than they're getting.
Right, and another option. I tried to look wide on this as opposed to the sports coverage and how well the team's doing at just kind of like society things.
Yeah,
I feel like in the economy that we've been facing, that's totally different from the early 2000s and the mid 90s and all of that. Local fans of sports only have really enough disposable income for one outlet of sports. They can probably either go to the Colts games or either go to the Pacers games.
And everyone can choose the Colts.
And everyone's been choosing the Colts since Manning has been great and since the Pacers have been on their downfall. For example, we said the Pacers are 27th in percentage sold out. Yet they have the third best record in the East, like maybe the fifth best record in the NBA. The Colts last year, worst record in the NFL. They were second in percentage sold out. They were second in the league in percentage sold out. Granted, they were 20th in attendance, but that's because their stadium is a lot smaller.
Yeah.
They were second in percentage only to the Dallas Cowboys with their new stadium. They actually sold out 102.9% of the tickets, even with the worst team. So obviously that's where the fan devotion is for the time being. In 2008, they actually had the number one attendance percentage at 105.4% of seats being sold. I mean, you can't compete with that. If all of the money is going to a much more expensive outlet, which football games per game are more expensive than basketball games, I mean, that's where the money's going. And it'll turn around eventually. The city of Indianapolis can only like one team at a time, as history has shown. In the mid-'90s, nobody went to Colts games. Everyone was at the Pacers games. And I think once that switches, Colts aren't going to be good for a while. Let's face it, few years before they're back to being an average team. The Pacers are already at the top of the game. It's going to take a while for people to realize that, for people to, more or less opt out of their season ticket contracts and start getting on this Pacers bandwagon. I think it's time that the city goes back to being a basketball city as opposed to a football city.
I agree with what you said about how it's going to change, because there are no signs to tell me that the Pacers are going to do anything other than get better in the upcoming years, because their core group is still so young. I think Danny Granger is the oldest, or David West, I guess.
David West, yeah.
David West is 31, I believe, and I think Danny Granger is 28 or 29, so, I mean, there's no reason to believe that they're going to get worse in the years to come, because they have guys, Roy Hibbert, Paul George, still improving and stuff. So, I think that there is going to be a swing while the Pacers are competing for Eastern Conference titles in the years to come, and the Colts are winning 5-6 games every year.
I think another thing that's playing into it, this kind of last point, I think, is their fan base is like, well, for one, it's small, but for those not attending the games, it's people that can't afford to attend the games or can't make it to the games. People in college, like people that go to Purdue or IU that can't regularly attend the games because they're so far away, or they're in college and they're broke, like most of us are. So a lot of the diehard Pacers fans are in college. That's
another.
And
point.
So within a few years, those guys are going to get out of college and say, "Well, I'm living in the city. I have all this disposable income from a big new job, so I'm going from a big corporate job. So I'm going to spend my nights in Bankers Life Fieldhouse."
Exactly.
So
the bank.
Yeah. So the team's future looks bright, but the present is a cause of concern.
Yeah, it's a little. I'm trying to think of the word. Discouraging, I guess. That we have a great team in Indiana and people aren't paying enough attention to it. But that'll change.
Moving right along, that was a rather long but very joyful segment of the Indiana Pacers coverage. To our segment of Do You Care? We have exactly 7 topics, unless Josh found some more.
I did not.
Okay. Well, first on the docket is the WNBA. I know you're jumping to conclusions already, but let's talk about it for a little bit. Nneka Ogwumike.
He practiced that so hard.
I spelled it phonetically, folks. Yeah. She was the number 1 overall pick to the Los Angeles Sparks in the WNBA draft this afternoon. The forward at Stanford, she was a senior, averages 22.5 points per game, 54% from the field, and 82.6% from the free throw line. Josh, do you care?
Not really. I'm not really big into the WNBA. I do think it's cool. Well, not with her, but I do think it's kind of cool when the Fever were playing for the championship. However many years ago that was. I think it was two or 3 years ago. So I guess my answer is no, I don't really care. But in terms of WNBA and the draft, I would care more about how the Fever did, just because I like supporting Indiana teams.
Yeah, I mean, I I don't necessarily care about the WNBA because I don't follow it, and that's just how it goes. But I think it was really cool that ESPN decided to cover the draft.
Yeah.
Granted, it was in the middle of the afternoon. It wasn't as hyped up as the NBA draft or anything else like that.
I didn't even know it was happening
cool
until after it happened.
ESPN's giving the attention to more or less an emerging league that deserves the attention. It's great. I think young women need role models, positive role models in sports that aren't necessarily, your terrible pop stars of modern society.
Come on, Kesha.
If they can get role models that are from the WNBA and not from like the Disney Channel, that is a positive in my book. So I guess I care.
That is a good point.
I'm glad that they covered it on ESPN. Moving right along to something that we probably don't care about. Drew Brees won't join the team for spring workouts until he reaches a contract agreement. This also, as I found out later, applies to Matt Forte of the Chicago Bears and Ray Rice of the Baltimore Ravens. All of these guys got franchise tagged on one-year deals, and they're having none of it. For example, here's some counterpoints to them. If Forte goes under the tag, his salary goes up from $600,000, which is what it was last year, to $7.742 million, which is just a huge boost for him. Brees would earn $16 million this year if he decided to accept the franchise tag. Josh, do you care about this situation?
It's easy to look at this from two different perspectives. You can look at it from the perspective of the NFL is a business, and players are just holding out for what they're worth. And it is pretty inarguable that those players are worth more. Well, I guess it is arguable, but I would argue that those players are worth more than they're getting. And it's always nice to be locked up financially, having it getting signed to a 5 or 6 year deal. But at the same time, it's easy to argue that these players are holding out for $4 extra million. It's not like they're applying for food stamps or anything. So I guess to answer the question of do I care or not, I don't really care, because I don't really care about any of those athletes. I like Drew Brees a lot. I think he's a good person, and I don't think he's doing this out of spite or anything. But I just want them to be able to play football and not have to worry about money as much.
Yeah, my first thought on it was that the players need to stop being babies and grow up. But then I stepped back a little bit and thought about it. I mean, say I'm working pretty long term, been there for years at a company, and I am the top salesman of the company. I am the reason that this company has been able to stay afloat and actually positive through the economic downturn. It's safe to say that I deserve a little bit of a raise or something like that. Now, my boss tells me that I'm only guaranteed to be working at this company for another year. That doesn't spell like a guarantee for me at all. Even though Drew Brees would probably get picked up next year by the Saints again,
or by another team.
But I think he likes New Orleans and he wants to stay there, and I don't think he's getting the respect that he deserves. And neither are guys like Ray Rice or Matt Forte. Matt Forte is the reason that the Bears had an offense last year.
Exactly.
Ray Rice was a huge part of an offense it took a lot of pressure off a very young, struggling quarterback. Ray Rice, all those guys are very important parts of the team. That's why it's such a big story that these guys are holding out. I don't know. I think all these guys deserve to have a little bit more of a secure contract. Agree. And the franchise tag is kind of an issue, especially with these bigger players, that it's just kind of a cop-out for the owners.
I agree with that. I agree with pretty much everything you just said. I think the players should be being paid what they're worth, and I just hope that they can figure out a way to make that happen soon. So they can
especially so for the Saints, because they need a leader on the field right now.
Oh yeah, with all that bounty stuff.
With all the bounty scandals going on. Also, the third topic, which easily might be the most inconsequential topic of history.
This is the Tebow thing?
Tim Tebow, Sunday night was booed at Yankee Stadium while watching with a Yankees hat on. They showed two other people during the game. Iman Shumpert, the Knicks point guard, which received a lot of applause, and Dwayne Wade, Miami Heat shooting guard, who was booed until he showed that he had a Yankees hat on.
And then they cheered. Yeah.
And then they cheered. Tim Tebow got kind of a Bronx cheer from everyone as a little bit of applause, but right off the bat there was a lot of boos. Josh, I mean, do you care?
I don't understand why they booed him. I am been one of the biggest Tebow supporters ever. No, I really don't care. I just question why New York fans are so lame.
Well, I'll tell you why they're booing him. Because the Yankees fans boo everyone.
That's true. They're like Phillies fans.
It's New York. Like, you expect to boo. I think Nick Swisher said after the game they asked him how he felt about Tim Tebow being at the game, and he said, I don't know, a lot of fancy people, this is a paraphrase, a lot of fancy people show up to the games. And as far as the boos, welcome to New York, Tim.
Yeah.
Like, they're not afraid
judgmental
to express their opinions. Especially with a guy that's causing a little bit of controversy in the Jets locker room. I wouldn't worry about it if I were Tim Tebow. I wouldn't worry about it if I were any media coverage.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. Well, I know that Skip Bayless was all on his high horse about how important Tim Tebow's getting booed was today.
That's
as I said earlier,
because every time Tim Tebow does anything even remotely notable, Skip Bayless thinks it's the next biggest thing in the history of the world.
Yeah, and I mean, it's when actually Skip Bayless is a big fan of the most inconsequential news that you can possibly find. Moving on, because that doesn't deserve any more attention.
Exactly.
Roger Clemens' retrial started yesterday. Now, I don't know much about this. I know that he was accused.
Neither do I, frankly.
His strength and conditioning coach accused him of using steroids during his training. I know that there was he was being tried for perjury at one point, and they apparently claimed that he misled a House committee at a landmark drugs and sports hearing in 2008. The first trial was a mistrial when prosecutors introduced inadmissible evidence after only 2 witnesses had been called. And now they're retrying him, hopefully bringing an end to this case. Do you care?
I don't care because I don't think it really matters. Because I don't think he's going to get any jail time unless he committed a serious crime. And people have already made their judgments about him. Frankly, people made their judgments about him before any of this stuff came to light. When he got cut or traded by the Red Sox. Can't remember when that was. That was in like the early 90s, late 80s, sometime in there. And when he went to the Yankees, people just kind of assumed that he was using steroids, and I think he was, and people have already made their judgments about him, so I don't think it matters.
Well, the only thing I could say about that is that, well, perjury is a serious crime, obviously, so if they can accuse him of that, then by the just court of law alone, this is an important situation, because just because of your name, you shouldn't be able to get away with something, and I know I read up on the jury process, and they are selecting a lot of people that, A, don't care about the Major League. They don't have an opinion on Major League Baseball. B, they don't even know who Roger Clemens is. So he's going to get a fair trial. But I do hope that if he was lying in front of a court like Barry Bonds obviously was, that I hope that he can... that justice is served, more or less.
I just want the steroid stuff to be done because I think
it's not leaving.
Well, I think it kind of. I mean, with guys like this, but you look at the great athletes today, and maybe some people do, but I used to just assume that everybody who was good was on steroids, and I really don't do that anymore.
Well,
it's not to say that's completely out of the sport, but every time you hear about someone getting caught, it's like a minor leaguer who's struggling to try to break his way into the major leagues.
Well, yeah, it's the drive to be excellent, and the standards are the pressure's put on so hard, and I think the issue is now it's not so much used by the big leaguers. The issue is that it's getting down to high school kids.
That's a good point.
And
yeah,
with high school kids, it's more used for looks than athletic performance enhancement. But there's so much pressure put on by parents and coaches at the high school level that kids are often turning to that as an edge because there's no other feasible way to get there. So that's where the issue lies, and I know that has nothing to do with what Roger Clemens is doing now. So more or less, I don't really care about Roger Clemens at all.
I don't either. Yeah, I don't like Roger Clemens, so I wanted to go to jail because I think it'd be funny.
Dodgers, Los Angeles Dodgers are 9-1 on the season. A lot of people are debating over their legitimacy. This isn't really a do you care, but do you think that this team is legit?
I wish that I had remembered that we were going to talk about this so I could pull up their record.
Well, okay,
do you have their teams they played written down?
Okay, here's why I think they're not a legit team yet. They're fifth in the MLB power rankings. They jumped up 5 spots from 10, no, maybe 6 spots from 11. I don't know. Okay, they swept Pittsburgh, and they won 6 of their 7 games against the San Diego Padres. Those are the teams they've played so far.
Yeah.
I can't really consider them to be a legitimate ball club when they've only played 2 teams that haven't proven to be great.
Well, not only that, but it's 10 games into the season, and it's really, like, the Mets are either winning the East or are in second in the East, and that's not going to last, probably. Hopefully, they probably won't. It's so hard to get a good grasp of a team, especially when you've only played the Pirates and the Padres. I think that the most notable thing that can happen for the Dodgers is Matt Kemp's pursuit for a 50-50 season, which is very possible. He is destroying the ball right now, and while I don't think the Dodgers are going to win the West, because I think it's going to come down to the Diamondbacks. Well, it might be the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers. Diamondbacks, Dodgers, and Giants are going to be the 3 teams fighting for that. I think the West might end up being the best race this year in baseball, and it's
very racist of you.
It's not at all. I hate you. But I guess it's too early to tell if they're legitimate or not. But for the sake of argument, I guess I'll say no. It's not legitimate yet.
Yeah, I don't think it's legit. You pretty much said everything I was going to say. It's a little too early to tell. It's a very minorly exciting story for the time being, something that'll get talked about.
Just because of the whole ordeal with the ownership.
And then I don't know, like I think personally the only reason is exciting. If you can't figure out yet, I've grown a very critical towards major media outlets like ESPN. Because obviously they're going to cover that the Dodgers are 9-1 because it's in the City of Angels, and that's where all of their. It's not the most exciting sports story, but it's in Los Angeles.
It's in a big market.
It's a thing, and it's in Los Angeles. They have their own ESPN.
Yeah.
So I don't care. Moving on, more baseball. Bobby Valentine calls out Kevin Youkilis for not being physically or emotionally into the game. Josh, do you care?
I don't know why he said that. Like, why is it I follow MLB guys on Twitter, and they were talking about, like, why would he say that after all the stuff the Red Sox went through last year? This is just another media thing for them to jump on. I question why Bobby Valentine did it, so I guess I do kind of care. But in the grand scheme of things, maybe he's just trying to wake Youkilis up. I'm sure that he has an explanation for it. But I guess I do care because I'm curious to know why he did it.
2 questions. 1, is Bobby Valentine anti-Semitic? 2, I don't know. Is he an idiot? My opinion,
he is actually.
That only works in youth and college sports to say that a person isn't fully invested in the game because they have in youth and college sports they're more or less they're a captive player of the team. The only way you're going to do anything better is if you play well on that team that you're on. So saying that a kid isn't giving his best effort, it's a little harsh because it's a youth sport.
Yeah.
But he'll try to prove you wrong because that's what kids do. When it comes to Kevin Youkilis, at one point, if he keeps hearing that, he's going to say, well, I don't want to play for the Red Sox anymore because that's how the pros work. They're a little more, drama-centric, and they can afford to be very, picky over what team, because he can go
to whatever team.
He can go whatever team he wants.
Probably go to the Yankees pretty soon.
Yeah, so it's a stupid move by him if he wants Kevin Youkilis to play, but obviously from this statement, it sounds like he doesn't really want Youkilis on the team.
Yeah, that's why I question it, because I don't think it's the right move. I think the right move is to offer support to your players and say it's early in the season, he's going to get better. Because there are plenty of guys who are struggling right now, and it's just I think it's a dumb move. I just don't know why he did it. But Bobby Valentine, he used to manage the Mets, so I'm well aware of what he does. He's very unorthodox, and he's just a weird guy. For example, once he got thrown out of a game, then came back into the dugout wearing a disguise and got thrown out again. It's just he does stuff like this all the time. It's just I just don't know.
Last topic is the only topic I necessarily care about thoroughly. The San Francisco Giants are plagued with injuries right off the bat. Buster Posey has shingles. Nobody gets shingles anymore. That's almost like the actual plague. And Brian Wilson. Well, let me rephrase that. The shingles isn't common in a kid his age.
Yeah.
Also, Brian Wilson is more than likely going to have season-ending elbow reconstruction surgery, which puts him out for 12 to 18 months.
It's not a good sign.
No, he will seek a couple more opinions, but ultimately I think that'll be the decision he goes with. Josh, do you care?
I do care as an Arizona Diamondbacks fan and as a hater of the Giants, but frankly, Brian Wilson is a good reliever, but I don't think it's gonna be as big a deal as it looks like it is on paper, because I don't think he was the best pitcher in that bullpen, honestly, even though he was the closer. I think Sergio Romo is better. So I think they'll be fine in terms of having a closer. The Buster Posey thing is a little more important, I guess, but I don't know how long he's going to be out with shingles. Have you read anything?
Well, Posey is still attending practice, and he's participating in practice. I think the shingles is just bothering him a lot, and I don't think he can technically play in games when they need him a lot when he has the shingles. So he can't. I don't know. That's an indefinite timeline. Right now it is really getting to him. Obviously, Wilson's going to be out for a while, and I don't know if Lincecum's injured or what.
I was going to say
completely uncharacteristically.
I was going to say I think that's more important than anything. Is that the ace of that staff, Matt Cain, is pitching very well. Let's not forget that. He's the best right-handed pitcher in the history of baseball. But Lincecum, they're not going to be able to do anything if he and Bumgarner don't. Bumgarner is a hilarious name, by the way.
Oh, you're funny.
If Lincecum and Bumgarner don't pick it up, then I question their ability to challenge the teams likes of the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks in the West.
2 words.
And I'm not saying
Barry
Zito, the anchor of the staff.
He's got him.
The glue that holds the team together.
Hey,
that is a good story.
He's 2-0.
He's pitching extremely well. Not as well. Well, actually, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say not as well as he was when he won the Cy Young Award, but why is he not pitching?
Who knows? It's an early season.
I don't think he's going to end up.
Barry Zito could take it.
When they signed him, I remember because he was between the Giants and the Mets, and I really wanted him to go to the Mets, and then he didn't, and I was mad. And for the last 3 or 4 years, it's been one of the worst signings in baseball history because they gave him 7 years, $150 million or something. It's just way overpaid. But I mean, even as a Diamondbacks fan, I think it'd be cool if he got back to being good again. I don't know. It was always more fun to watch Barry Zito pitch when he was good.
Yeah, in a paraphrased statement from Brian Wilson, he basically said that he wasn't too worried about it. He needs to get healthier, and it's time to take the brakes off his toughness. And basically, he's not worried because, quote, we have the best bullpen in Major League Baseball.
That's not true.
Well, something he has to say.
I know. Brian Wilson.
It's like when they asked Eli Manning if he was an elite quarterback,
yeah.
Or when they asked if Joe Flacco if he was an elite quarterback. You can't not say that you have
Joe
the best.
Flacco. I'm the best quarterback in the NFL.
And obviously there was another thing where somebody asked Vince Young if he wanted to start somewhere. What do you say? Obviously,
no, I'd rather be a backup.
Obviously, he has to say that he's worth starting.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's definitely something he should say. It's definitely also something that's not true. But I mean, the Giants' bullpen's pretty good.
They have a pretty good bullpen.
They have a good bullpen.
They're going to definitely miss Wilson.
Definitely,
but
he's an important part of that. But I had him on my fantasy team last year, and he was just not that good last year. Probably because he was hurt, but. We'll see. I think the Giants.
Well,
will be
it's
okay in
it's clear that at least for this season and a little bit after the season that the beard is no longer to be feared.
I'm not feared. I'm not fearing it.
So yeah, I mean, I guess that essentially wraps up.
His notepad is blank, and we have
the
run through
notepad is
everything.
blank. You will notice that this is one of our more informative
Definitely
podcasts.
We actually did research this time.
We did research.
It's crazy because Nick is in the big leagues now.
The thudding you're hearing is the patting of ourselves on the back.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, more or less, thanks for listening. You can follow us now on Twitter.
We have Twitter.
It's Hoosier Hipsteria account, and it's HH Podcast Sports. So yeah, you could probably find us on there. That's where most of my sports commentary is going to be coming from now.
Hopefully most of mine, because I don't think my friends like hearing me talk with the Diamondbacks all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got your other banner banter out.
That's true. That's what I use for IU, because people used to complain at me for talking about IU all the time. So that's basically my life now, ttrying not to bug my friends.
It's the same solution I have.
Yeah.
And while I have great sports opinions, not all my friends are really into sports.
Yeah, that's how I am.
Well, that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you for listening. Until next time, this is the Hoosier Hipsteria Podcast.